Howard approached his artists in a completely unique way. A publicist usually said, well, you got a record, we'll promote it. We'll call these radio stations, we'll call these TV stations. Howard said, who's the artist? You know, what made you write that song? And he had artists as diverse as Prince and Billy Idol and Billy Joel at the same time. ZZ Top and Michael Jackson and John Mellencamp at the same time. And yet his mind, being like a scientist, he could compartmentalize. Mellencamp, it was as if he only represented John Mellencamp. No one represented him as well, ever. And since, no one has ever done as good a job of handling John, which is no mean feat. And I say that with love and affection. But also, you know, really understanding the sort of tortured, restless, deep artist, sensitive, you know, paper thin to criticism, sensitive artist. Than Howard. Howard was great at that. At the same time, he understood the ethereality of Prince and managed to get people interested in that when perhaps the natural instinctive reaction in 1984 to Prince would have been to laugh at him. Howard made us somehow take him seriously, and then we saw what a great artist he was.
Howard was explaining to me how he got involved in the PR thing and how his approach was different from what had been commonly done at that point in the 1970s with the public relations industry. And what he would do is he would take the sort of surveying techniques that Martin Gardner would do in his Scientific American column, and he would sort of take that approach to his data gathering. And when he was doing a heavy metal magazine, it was Circus magazine in the 70s, he would try to figure out, like, what did the kids want? And he would go and he would take a notebook and he would interview them in malls, on street corners. He would just basically say, can I talk to you for a second? And get these kids engaged and sort of find out what drives them and what motivates them. What do they want to buy? You know, what are their consumer habits? And so he took even then he was taking a scientific and analytical approach to public relations in that way.
He did all the writing for all the artists. That's a lot of work. That means every pitch letter and every press release, and it seemed like he did it all. And most agencies, the other people would do that, you know. But he was so good, and he some of the great publicists came out of the time working with him. So somehow they learned, even if they didn't have to think that up at the beginning or learn to write exactly at the beginning. He was so inspiring and enthusiastic, and he believed what he was trying to teach you, or believed in that artist so much that it didn't matter, I guess, if you weren't getting to use your entire brain at the beginning. He taught you how to do it.
It's great to hear that Howard's getting back into the music business. I worked with him very early on in my early days in my career, along with artists like Renaissance and the Climax Blues Band. And later on, when the punk rock generation was making itself felt, Howard was right there with me with artists like Squeeze and the early days of IRS Records. And he's always very creative and one of those guys that had that bit of inspiration that made him special.
I had a conversation with my assistant just the other day where she was saying some of the music that she's had to work on she can't stand. She doesn't understand it, she doesn't like it. And I said, I don't always love the music of every artist that I work with, but I understand that they are an artist and their music is their self-expression. And I can always find something of merit because they are expressing themselves. And that's what I try to get across to a journalist. I don't say to a journalist, you know what, I hate this music, but you'll like it. My opinion is irrelevant. I'm there as a translator of what the artist is trying to say and putting that into a context that the journalist will understand and cleave to so that they will want to write about it so that the audience gets to hear it and buys the record. Goes to the show. However, manages to connect with the artist. And that's definitely something I learned from Howard.
I'll tell you, I first met Howard in 1967. He was an undergraduate at NYU and was taking a course in my physiological psychology class. He was very exceptional right then, I could tell I was dealing with some kind of a mind that went beyond what you would ordinarily think would just make a good grade. In his coursework, he ended up getting an A+. An A+ for me is almost something I never give, but I just couldn't resist giving him an A+. So, very remarkable. I also discovered at that time something that's maybe relates a little bit to the honor he's getting now, and that is a theatricality that he had.
We brought Howard Bloom on board to work with us in the publicity campaign for Run DMC. And his organization, Howard struck me as a very, very bright and energetic and charming guy, and very, very capable as well. Good-humored, detailed-oriented, and he certainly didn't pretend to be a great lover of hip-hop or a great lover of rap, and he didn't have to. He knew how to do what he was supposed to do, which was to get press for our artist. And what struck me about him, I think, was really kind of how undiscriminating he was to a certain extent. In other words, at the time, if a lot of folks and a lot of people in the media were thinking, well, whatever it is this rap thing is, it doesn't have anything to do with the world of entertainment and celebrity as we know it. I know Howard didn't think that way. Howard thought that the groups that we were working with, these early rap groups, were as worthy of media attention as anybody else he'd ever worked with. And that was a very useful and productive attitude to have.
Howard Bloom was one of the first persons that introduced me to the wide world of media, that you can expect more than just what your limited access would be. I primarily have been in the country music business, and Howard Bloom I worked with ABC, the record company, and the fact that we expanded the acts that I worked with at that time, and Howard too, Roy Clark, the Oak Ridge Boys, and people like that got into worldwide media because it was inventive and creative, and at that time was one of the first persons that really saw beyond the normal, limited viewpoint of a lot of people that thought country music should be just relegated to a certain section of the land.
Yeah, I think Howard Bloom speaking at the GEMS event is an extraordinarily rich experience for everybody here. I think everybody can take away a lot of brilliance and probably look at life in a different way at a later point.
He was the only publicist I met in the 70s when I first met him that had a strategic sense for the artist. And when I met him in the 80s when I started Spin, he actually said to me that he'd said to Michael Jackson, what do you want to do with your career? Where are you going to go with your career? Anybody who was asking Michael Jackson after Thriller what he was going to do with his career was a man who saw over the horizon. I think he had a greater vision than any other publicist before or since.
So he had these theories, like, let's say you have a rock band, and there's a 16-year-old boy that's reading it, and he wants to read like Rolling Stone, and he has a little sister, and if you see that same band in 16, and his little sister's reading that, it's going to turn the guy off, right? So he wouldn't go near teen magazines if the guy was slightly past that stage or could be past that stage. So, I mean, but he had figured these out from all this research, He was the first person, he was like a one-man research. Now they have thousands of people and people pay all this money to get research done. He just did it himself. And I still don't know exactly how he came up with these theories, but I always took them to be true.